Hi there, I'm the Mythkeeper. Welcome back to my channel. This week is my second creature feature in my creature feature series. The last time I did giants, and this time, following on a little bit from my Irison deep dive video, I'm covering hags. That's right, the dark magic practicing old crones that live in remote areas and torture those of the surrounding area. This is a fun video. Once again, like giants, there's a whole mythology from which hags come from that I go into in the video. I think there's some good content here. Enjoy. Hags. Just as with giants, the subject of my first creature feature, hags are creatures that stem from folklore, and examples of such creatures can be found from all over the world. In Greek mythology, Odysseus's crew became entranced by the sorceress Circe, who possessed the power to transmute people into animals. In Norse mythology, the Lay of Hundla, one of the poems included in the Codex Regius, a collection of Old Norse poems and sagas from the 13th century, tells the story of Freya, the Norse goddess of love and fertility, who seeks out a seer and sorceress named Hundla to help her find her lost lover Ottar. Hundla the witch agrees to help Freya, but only after she is given a tribute of a precious necklace. Before the end of the poem, Hundla turns her anger on Freya, cursing her and promising to set the world on fire for her treachery. In Chinese mythology, Zhang Shengxi is a legendary figure in Chinese mythology and folklore. She is often depicted as a powerful witch with magical abilities, and is said to have lived during the Zhou dynasty, from 1250 to -1050 BC. According to legend, Zhang Shengxi was born with exceptional intelligence, and was able to perform magical feats from a young age. She is said to have learned the art of divination, and was able to control the weather, summon ghosts, and communicate with the dead. She was also reported to have the ability to heal the sick and cure diseases. Why do witches and other sorceress women feature so prominently in our collective mythology? I asked the same question of giants in my last video, and once again here we can only speculate. My guess is the reason powerful sorceresses and witches are common lore, and often depicted as old crones, is due to the patriarchal nature of most of our early civilizations. In medieval and pre-medieval societies, women were expected to fulfill traditional roles as wives and mothers, and those who didn't were often excluded and marginalized. We all fear the unknown, and those who exempted themselves from traditional ways of life were no exception. Were the women who lived on the outskirts of town, gathering strange herbs and fungi, simply self-sufficient elders who opted out of conventional lives for their own reasons? Or was there something more sinister at play? What about the eccentric old woman who seemed to know all the old superstitions? Was it normal she had no family or children of her own? In this arena, and we'll see this is often the case, Pathfinder wants to have its cake and eat it too. There is a recognition that these myths stem from misplaced fear, so on the one hand, the witch is a character class in both 1st and 2nd edition, and seeks to reclaim some of the spurious mistrust placed on perfectly innocent women who simply didn't comply with societal norms. These misunderstood but heroic figures are designed to reinvent the archetype. On the other hand, this archetype also makes for great villains. They are an enormous part of our collective cultural zeitgeist. Their penchant for mischief, striking dubious deals, and their partnerships with even darker demonic or fey forces make them excellent creatures to mine for adventure ideas. And of course, we all still have a fear of the unknown and the macabre. So Pathfinder gives us the hag, a monster type that doesn't deconstruct these myths at all, but instead veers headlong into them. These monstrous creatures take the form of old women, but are truthfully anything but. They have truly blackened hearts and purpose. As we'll see in the rest of this video, envy is the source of most hags' corruption, and this dark emotion has rotted these creatures from the inside out. Of course, it's your own game, and you are always welcome to introduce more shades of grey in your own stories when it comes to witches or hags or both. But as presented on the page, hags are tortured, malevolent creatures that delight in deception and cruelty. In the world of Pathfinder, according to the 1st edition classic horror sourcebook, the likely origin of hags can be traced back to a specific legend from the First World. The fable of the Three Sisters of Cimarron is an old story about 3 beautiful fairy princesses named Caelia, Jerissa, and Nathrope, who lived in the picturesque forest of Cimarron on the First World. They lived a carefree life full of poetry, song, and games, and were famous for their beauty and grace. Princes from all over the First World came to Cimarron to seek their hands in marriage. Initially, the princesses were kind and friendly to their suitors, and competed with each other for the best compliments and gifts. But as more suitors arrived, they became increasingly self-important and vain, and their once friendly rivalry turned bitter. The sisters became jealous not only of each other, but also of any living thing that overshadowed their beauty. The sickness within them gradually turned outward and transformed the once lush forest of Cimarron into a nightmarish place of twisted blackened trees and wilted flowers. The few animals that survived the sisters' wrath fled to other areas. The princesses, once beautiful and elegant, became hideous and grotesque. As the blight spread and threatened the First World, a council of fairy courts was called to deal with the sisters. Powerful fey sorcerers cursed the sisters for their vanity and wickedness and banished them to Galarian. Kalia, Jerissa, and Nathrape became the first Anis Hag, Green Hag, and Sea Hag respectively. The forest of Cimarron and the sisters' palaces were destroyed, erasing any trace of their existences forever. Perhaps that tale is apocryphal, or perhaps it hints at secret truths. Certainly hags, while not fey themselves, appear to be somehow tied to the natural world. While the exact details of their genesis remain obscure, it's undeniable that certain hags have existed for ages beyond comprehension. These craft and sly beings are remnants of an earlier age, possessing abilities that few can comprehend and which most individuals dread. Envious and resentful that the world has left them behind, hags aim to retaliate against all living things, particularly against those who embody great beauty or purity. While it is undeniable that hags have some connection to the natural world, the truth is that this link is not well understood. While it shares similarities with the bond fey creatures have with nature, it is notably distinct. Hags are not interested in preserving or safeguarding nature. They seek only to possess and manipulate it to their own purposes. Hags practice ancient and esoteric witchcraft, representing remnants of a world that was once savage and fierce but has long since vanished. It's possible that the loss of that primitive time and place contributed to their descent into madness and animosity. Hags are an exclusively female creature type, and require males of other species in order to reproduce. Hags can propagate themselves with a staggering variety of ancestries. They can breed with virtually any humanoid creature, including all members of the core ancestries and other more animalistic ancestries like catfolk, lizardfolk, tengu, and so on, and even with some monstrous humanoids like ogres, giants, and trolls, as well as with various kinds of fey creatures. As if to encourage them to spread their kind, hags have short, relatively painless pregnancies, but they have no love for the rearing of children. As a result, they often resort to trickery or force to seduce or coerce males, and most have mastered a variety of illusion and transmutation magic to present themselves as beautiful. After giving birth, a hag will secretly exchange her child for a natural-born child. These changelings, also sometimes called killcrops or whistlekind, appear as normal members of the father's race, except occasionally for mismatched eyes. Most families are unaware that their child has been switched, and the hag child is raised as their own. Changelings tend to grow more slowly than normal children, and often exhibit a casual cruelty that sets them apart from other children. As they mature, these traits become more noticeable, until they reach adulthood and discover their hag heritage. Some changelings will evolve into full-fledged hags, and continue to propagate this monstrous species, but others will remain changelings through old age and death, and it is inconsistent which changelings will turn and which won't. The only exception is for male changelings, who universally will not become full-fledged hags in adulthood. That said, hag births are predominantly female, and most rare male children are usually killed and devoured by the hag that birthed them, as there is no chance that such a child will grow to be a mature hag in their own right. Although many changelings possess a notable streak of cruelty even at a young age, it's worth pointing out that this is not universally the case, and some changeling children actively try to compensate for these instincts and end up exceptionally kind and compassionate individuals as a consequence. I talk a little bit more about changelings as player characters in my Pathfinder Special Bloodlines Ancestry video. Hags typically live in secluded natural areas that are far from civilization, yet close enough for hunting or luring unsuspecting victims. They prefer to dwell in places that were once beautiful but have now decayed, like diseased forest thickets or crumbling ruins. Different types of hags prefer different habitats, such as cold caves for Anis hags, fetid marshes for green hags, and deep stagnant lakes for sea hags. Hags are solitary creatures and don't usually tolerate others of their kind for long. If one hag discovers another in her territory, she will try to drive the intruder away with insults and curses, and conflict can quickly escalate to violence. Scholars of hag lore have different theories about the reason for territorial aggression, some believing it to be an archaic form of ritual combat, and others suggesting that the presence of another hag reminds a hag of her own twisted nature. When hags put aside their differences, they form covens, consisting of 3 hags of any type. Hag covens often use giants as bodyguards and minions, sometimes cloaked in illusions to act as spies. Marsh giants are especially favored, but hill giants and ogres can also be found serving hag covens. Some people seek out hag covens for help, despite the inherent dangers. Hags are adept at exacting revenge and causing suffering, and are often only interested in finding new victims. However, they may be willing to use their powers on behalf of others if they are offered treasures, sacrifices, or the opportunity to corrupt both their target and client simultaneously. Hags are typically the most skilled spellcasters in the wild areas where they reside, and rural communities may beg them for assistance with weather, or knowledge in exchange for food, animals, or even human sacrifice. Hag covens can control the elements, reveal lost secrets, and even bring the dead back to life, but always at a cost. Hags delight in making these costs unexpectedly steep, and even those who follow all their commands may end up cursed or corrupted. Blood hags, green hags, and winter hags sometimes form covens with other humanoids as well, even taking young girls under their wing from a young age and molding them into useful tools to further their own agendas. Although it's true that other mortals can work together to perform powerful rituals and combine resources, the true power of any coven is the ancient arcane energy that all hags instinctively tap into. Therefore, a hag remains the essential element of any true coven. Most hags are not prone to worship, but when hags deign to revere beings greater than themselves, they most often follow Mestama, the mother of witches, the demon lord of hags and deception, or Girona, the angry hag, a deity I discuss in more detail in my River Kingdoms deep dive video, where her faith is more commonly found. Individual hags or covens might also venerate Alazra, the patron goddess of night hags, or even Lamashtu or Zon-Kuthon. Some even venerate the female aspect of the ogre god Hagakal, a deity I discuss in more detail in my giant pantheon video. Like giants, hags come in a number of subtypes. These include the Anis or black hag, the ash hag, blood hag, dreamthief hag, green hag, mute hag, night hag, sea hag, storm hag, and winter hag. Anis hags, also known as black hags. Anis hags are the largest and most physically intimidating of their foul brood. Known for their iron-hard, wart-covered skin that varies from shades of deep blue to black, and their claws like rusty blades, Anis hags forego much of the cunning and deceptiveness of their kind to revel in the more visceral evils of torture and slaughter. The typical Anis hag stands just over 8 feet tall and weighs upwards of 300 pounds. Anis hags are more physically powerful than other hags, but lack in magical abilities, making them little more than overbearing bullies. They typically resort to murder, cannibalism, and petty abuse. When bonded in a coven, they become terrifying enforcers, earning them the nickname Iron Hags due to their invulnerable flesh and sharp nails. Ash hags. Despicable, flesh-hungry creatures, ash hags favor areas that fire has cleansed, such as husks of burned buildings or smoldering fields. They particularly prefer charred urban spaces, for such areas allow them to live among the ashes they love while they lure local residents to their doom. Ash hags often disguise themselves as beautiful, vulnerable maidens who just survived a devastating fire, or as charitable old women who show up at such disaster sites offering assistance. Once they have lured victims back to their lairs, ash hags sometimes toy with their captives for weeks. Ash hags abhor life, and in their twisted way of viewing the sacred flame, they take great offense at the use of fire to preserve life and delight in punishing captives with cruel mockeries of the forge and the hearth, such as force-feeding them ashes or scarring them with molten iron. Blood hags. Blood hags, known to some as Sukuyants, prefer to live near isolated human communities or on the edge of civilized lands. A blood hag takes the appearance of a young woman by day. At night, she assumes her true form as her skin peels back and sloughs off to reveal the monstrosity beneath. A hunting blood hag preys on unsuspecting neighbors during the night, sneaking into their homes and feeding off their blood or burning them alive. When a blood hag finds a particularly choice victim, she forgoes simply feeding on her and instead abducts her, spiriting her away to the hag's hidden lair. There she'll be tortured and drained dry of blood over the course of days or weeks. Once the hag has properly prepared the victim's skin, she wears it. Bold and particularly clever blood hags attempt to masquerade as their victims for great lengths of time before they are discovered. Blood hags will also often choose to live in areas of arcane corruption, because they all share a common curse. They are being constantly consumed by arcane energies and require magical energy to control this corruption.
For short periods of time, the blood hags can let this arcane conflagration consume them, turning into a burning form that withers and burns anything they touch. Dreamthief Hags. Dreamthief Hags are outsiders who possess incredible power over mortal minds and souls. They use their ability to manipulate the sleeping mind and their strange mind-blotting venom to barter with devils and demons. These terrifying creatures are native to the dimension of dreams, a place I discuss in more detail in my Planar Guide Demiplanes video. Here they steal dreaming minds and seek to trap them within special dreamstones, and sell them to the highest bidder. While few denizens of any plane trust Dreamthief Hags, some welcome them as merchants. Many powerful evil beings find captured minds to be useful components in dark rituals or profane research. Even those who hold Dreamthief Hags in contempt are careful not to offend them, for their bite contains a venom capable of temporarily paralyzing a victim's mind, and the hags have few scruples about capturing even long-time commercial partners' minds if the hags feel they have been disrespectful. While it's difficult to determine exactly what harm befalls the mind in a Dreamthief Hag's care, those who have been released by them are never quite the same, and rarely have a nightmare-free night of sleep again. Green Hags. Green hags haunt the wild edges of civilization, residing in marshes and forests where they torture and feed on their neighbors. They possess considerable druid-like magic, and can blend into human cultures more readily than many of their sisters. These terrifying crones harbor an intense hatred for all beauty and purity. Making use of their varied deceptive abilities, these crones delight in murdering innocents, unhinging noble minds, and debasing the pure of heart. They are particularly fond of using disguised self to assume the forms of alluring young maidens, and then seducing young men away from their lovers or families. In this form, they can infect such noble and upstanding citizens with all manner of debauchery and scandal. Some green hags prefer to reveal their true natures to their lovers at a moment precisely engineered to drive the man mad with horror and shame. Others drag out their dalliances and do what they can to utterly ruin the lives of the men they seduce before showing the broken shell that remains the truth. In the end, the luckiest of these unfortunate lovers end up being eaten by their green hag companions. For the unlucky, their final doom can be much worse, for the cruel imagination of the green hag is vast indeed. Mute Hags. Mute hags are unique among hags in that they can spontaneously generate from other humanoid spellcasters. They represent the power of arcane magic to warp and corrupt those with a bitter heart, and have a legendary hatred for their former colleagues. When bitterness consumes a woman corrupted by certain kinds of thanatotic arcane energy, that energy may sour, driving her to rip out her own eyes and tongue, and burning the light from her soul. This ritual can birth a strange and horrible creature, a mute hag. These hateful abominations dedicate their wretched lives to spreading misery and strangling joy wherever they go. Mute hags exist to unmake happy things. Tales claim the natural order despises the crones so much that plants wither at their touch, storms churn at their passing, and wounds they inflict never heal. Though physically capable of ripping a man in two, the crones prefer to corrupt instead. They move silently through peaceful settlements, granting the inhabitants' darkest desires and sowing the seeds of discord. Nothing pleases a mute hag more than watching friends, neighbors, and lovers murder one another in paranoia and rage. Many strike unholy bargains with mortal outcasts, granting vigor, beauty, or revenge in exchange for vile and unforgivable crimes. Mute hags resemble mortal women, but with blotchy, bruised-looking skin. Some conceal their empty eye sockets and ragged teeth with veils of their own hair, but most relish in their hideous countenance. Mute hags are physically larger than normal humans, standing up to 7 feet tall and weighing up to 250 pounds. Night hags. Night hags arise from the souls of the most diabolical hags after their death. They serve as brokers and bounty hunters on the outer planes, and I also describe these creatures in my Planar Guide videos on the transitive planes and on the Hells. Like Dreamthief Hags, they can corrupt mortals through their dreams. They use special artifacts called heartstones to collect human souls, which they then barter with extraplanar creatures for power and influence. Night hags, more than most hag types, prefer to be solitary creatures, but when they do join covens, they prefer to be among their own kind. They often ally with great flaming horse beasts known as nightmares, using them to traverse planes in search of fresh souls. Although they are native to the misty expanses of the ethereal plane, night hags can be found almost anywhere, trading or collecting their dreadful wares. Night hags are more prone to worship than other hags, and many worship Alazra, the Dream Eater, a being who may have once been one of their own and achieved some form of godhood. Others may worship Zon-Kuthon or Lamashtu, but they all share a hatred for Desna, the goddess of dreams, and delight in corrupting and stealing the carefree souls of her followers. The origins of night hags is a subject of heated debate among planar scholars. It is unclear whether they are a branch of worldly hag who ventured into the outer planes, or whether they are extraplanar soul traffickers who spawned mortal hags on the material plane. Night hags themselves claim to be the favored daughters of their patron Alazra, but their credibility on the matter is questionable. Like Mute and Anis hags, night hags are physically larger than normal humans, standing up to 7 feet tall and weighing up to 250 pounds. Sea hags. Monstrous sea witches, these wicked hags possess terrifying features that few dare to look upon. Reveling in discord, the foul creatures drag sailors to watery graves and torment the people of the oceans with wicked promises. Sea hags are always terrible to look upon, and despite their gluttonous ways, they are usually emaciated creatures who look half-starved. Sea hags prefer to dwell relatively close to shore, where fishermen and trading vessels are more commonly encountered. Most choose to live far from urban areas so that their acts won't draw as much attention from would-be enemies, but it's not uncommon for a particularly brave or eager sea hag to settle in a city harbor or in the mouth of a deep river. Sea hags form covens similar to other hags, but their aquatic nature generally keeps them from forming mixed covens. In the case of a shoreline-dwelling green hag, often a green hag who dwells in a salt marsh or other coastal swampland, a coven often consists of 2 sea hags who look to the green hag as their mother and leader. More commonly, a sea hag coven consists of a group of particularly friendly and sisterly sea hags. Sea hags are slightly larger than most humans, standing about 6.5 feet tall and weighing around 150 pounds. Storm hags. Storm hags are bitter old crones who wallow alone in their hatred for the world. They seek privacy, but hunger for the humiliation of anyone who they perceive as crossed them. Their innate connection to the weather makes them a dire threat to isolated communities. When the clouds turn grey and the winds pick up into a howl, wise travelers pray that the cause is only a natural tempest, and the foul weather is not connected with a storm hag. Storm hags are hateful creatures, and strangely, their hate is one of the few things that bring them pleasure. A storm hag's wrinkled face contains a look of gleeful distaste, and her eyes are thick with cataracts, rendering her gaze pupilless. A storm hag's hair is wild and unruly, with static electricity popping and crackling throughout the mass. Her mouth hangs open, revealing thin, pointed teeth with small arcs of electricity jumping across them. Black talons sprout from their fingertips, likewise crackling with electricity. A storm hag usually wears rough furs and coarse woolen clothing that is rarely cleaned, giving her a distinctly unpleasant odor. Winter hags. Winter hags are more social than most hags, and demand adulation and worship to warm their frigid hearts. They are mistresses of cold and illusion, clever deceivers who prey on local defenders before enslaving their communities. Winter hags are sadistic crones who haunt winter-blasted plains and rime-covered forests. They're exceptionally arrogant and often use their magic to subjugate entire tribes of evil humanoids so they can rule over them as queens. These arrangements rarely last more than a few seasons because no creature is truly safe from a winter hag's irrepressible appetite for warm, raw flesh. An ambitious winter hag might extort a village by causing constant snowfall until they give her children to eat or adults to become her slaves. Although it may be easy to confuse the winter witches of Irisen with winter hags, the Jedwiga descendants of Baba Yaga, who are well practiced in ice magic, are not to be confused with winter hags, who are more brutish, violent creatures. That being said, there are a number of winter hags living in Irisen, and throughout its long history there have been many occasions where a winter hag has passed for a Jedwiga duchess or queen, sometimes controlling entire cities or provinces for years at a time. However, their monstrousness often proves their own undoing, as even the most brutal winter witch's cruelty pales in comparison to the malignancy of the hags of winter.
Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully that was helpful and informative, and maybe you'll use some hags in your own games coming up. If you enjoyed what you saw here today, please be sure to like and subscribe. If you'd like to see some other types of creatures in my creature feature series, be sure to let me know in the comments below. I read all the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.